I would ask that everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Okay, I need a motion to approve the agenda tonight by Mrs. Waters.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Friedman. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. I'd like to bring up the student government, and then, if all possible, after the student government, we'll bring up the Torado Collier's presentation. Okay. Welcome.
Good evening, school committee members. My name is Jenny Karlmark, and this is Michael Shalino. We are both sophomores at Cumberland High School, and I am the treasurer for the class of 2022, and Michael is the publicity coordinator for student government. Over the course of this month and last month, student government has been working very hard. Most recently, we had our annual winter ball dance at Wright's Farm last Friday, January 17th, where all grades were welcome, ate delicious food, and of course, had a good time. This was our second dance of the school year with over 400 attendees. For student government, the month of December was packed with our Adopt a Family program, where we put together gifts for all members of families in need to make sure that they had a surprise waiting for them under their trees on Christmas morning. Over the past several months, student government has been participating in Blessings in a Backpack, a program where we put together dinners for the children that have supplied lunches and breakfast for them at school, but can't afford a nice meal at home for dinner. We participate in this program every Thursday after school to help the committee and those around us in need.
From Friday, January 17th until today, January 23rd, students have been taking their midterm exams. This is the second consecutive year that they've been instituted at CHS in regard to the current students. Tomorrow, Friday, January 24th, is our first official day of quarter 3 and the official start of the second half of the school year. In the upcoming month, on Tuesday, February 4th, there will be our second blood drive of the year, which will be held in the transitional building cafeteria. Students who are eligible are able to sign up at all lunches, while the Rhode Island Blood Center visits in the weeks prior. All who can are encouraged to donate because one donation has the power to save 3 lives. Student government is working together now to create a new fundraiser through the month of February, pertaining to our special holiday that month, Valentine's Day. Going even further into the future, the month of March is our month for Pennies for Patients, a fundraiser for children suffering from blood cancers such as lymphoma and leukemia. Student government will continue working hard throughout the remainder of the school year to fundraise for charities, help those in need, and to create a better, enjoyable environment for the students of Cumberland High School. Thank you for your time. Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Mr. Collins has a question for you.
I just have a quick question for you. Great presentation. You had mentioned helping families around the holidays. Do you know exactly how many families you helped?
We helped over 100 families throughout Cumberland.
That's great. Are they all in Cumberland?
Yes.
Oh, that's excellent. Great job.
Thank you again. All right, next is I'd like to, if it's okay with the school committee members, I'd like to move up the new business item number A, update on the $83 million bond renovation projects from Collier's International and Torado Associate Architects. Anyone have any problem with doing that?
No.
All right, hearing none. Excuse me?
No problem.
All right, go ahead, Mr.
Great.
Mr. Austin.
Thank you. Good evening. It is good to be back in front of everybody. So it's been a little while, so I prepared a quick presentation to look back at where we've came from and what lies ahead. We received some information this week, so we thought it was important to come before the school committee and talk about next steps. So as you will recall, when we set out on this journey together, we had given you a quick look at our understanding of the project. If you want to give me a slide over there on the projector. And at that time, we had indicated that we understood that you had an $83 million bond. This is something that had been sold by the superintendent as well as Senator Pearson, that you'd be putting together a 5-year capital program and that we'd be looking to seek RIDE approval in May 2020. At that time, we told you that one of our primary objectives was to maximize every dollar spent in terms of housing aid and the bonuses that were available, and pointed out the idea that academic performance in Cumberland really stands out among your peers in terms of your low cost per pupil in spending and having at the time 2 5-star schools. As we looked at the documentation that had gone out to the community, it became really apparent to us that there was a real need at the elementary school level. There was also a real need around school security. Beyond that, the classrooms, I know more recently the introduction of focus on pre-K, overcrowding at cafeterias, and ADA access issues were all sort of primary targets as we understood them as you were communicating to the public about what you hope to accomplish with this money. And then, of course, to make this all possible and feasible, we'd need to be understanding the swing space situation. The reason I wanted to take you back is because we'll be looking forward at the end of my presentation about what lies ahead and how we've tried to honor those goals. Before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about our looking at the funding and finance formula. So in the past month or so, we've had the opportunity to meet with a number of the administrative team and stakeholders about what that could potentially look like. We've talked to the Department of Ed about the enabling legislation that was drafted and the idea that there are some minimum criteria that you have to meet to be able to access those bond funds, so that we understand that your minimum housing aid reimbursement was set at 50% when the voters approved the legislation, and the baseline without any bonuses currently in Cumberland is at 44%. So to achieve that, we would need to receive bonuses in at least 2 categories, bringing you up to a 54% state reimbursement share. So one of the documents you have in your packet is a look back at Article 9, the incentives that were presented by the state, and kind of some information about how they're actually being interpreted now that they've been enacted. I know of 2 communities rather that have already been successful in achieving some of those state promised bonuses. I know North Providence did very well with their build program, as well as Barrington. But if we look at the individual categories, in the blue box, you will see indications that there are bonuses available for both health and safety and educational enhancements. These are the 2 primary areas that we are seeking bonuses to get you up to that 54%. These bonuses require that you be entered into contracts by the end of calendar year 2022, and the schedule that's been set forth allows you to do that. In terms of making sure we're as fiscally responsible as possible and trying to help you find additional funds, we move over to the green box. These bonuses last a year longer. They are available until 2023, though they are a little bit harder to achieve. So the first of which, in the upper left-hand corner, is the replacement of a building. Obviously, we're not doing that, so you wouldn't qualify in that category. The next one, over to the upper right, is newer and fewer. This really talks about consolidation, so again, the community would not necessarily be eligible to receive that bonus. But as we move to the bottom of the page, they start to look at how you're using your facilities. And so to the bottom left, they ask about whether there are opportunities to decrease overcrowding, and the bottom right, increase utilization. In our review with the plans as have been developed to date, the most promising, potentially, looks like an increase in utilization here at the high school and transitions building. And so we're working with the architect to study those numbers. It does appear, though, that that you'll be locked in fairly solidly with the 10 minimum bonus points that you need to be able to access your approved legislation and bond funds. And we will work with you to try and make sure that if you're eligible, we'll work with you to get those 5 additional bonus points. But in terms of the financial metrics and understanding what ultimately happened when Article 9 was passed, and now how that's being interpreted and applied to communities. I thought it was important to kind of rehave that conversation as we get ready to launch into what will be the submission of your Stage 2, ultimately seeking an appropriation for the $83 million that you have. So a little bit on funding and finance. Moving beyond that, this is really now the time where we are able to collect and analyze all of the data. Over the life of the project, you, as you will likely recall, have gone through a number of phases. The first was to indicate to the state that you were interested in entering this program. Then you completed a Stage 1 submission, which the state terms as identifying the problem. And so basically what Cumberland had done, as I had indicated in that first slide of project understanding, of deciding what really were some pain points, what needed to be the focus in the district, how what things should you be looking at as you advance the project. Moving into Stage 2, the state identifies that really should be, the focus should be on the development of a solution. And so over the course of several months, the design team has met with stakeholders to identify scopes of work in each and every one of the campuses to set the program that would really be required to meet all of your curriculum goals. So we took feedback from all of the stakeholders. The architect developed the plans and came up with the list. So you'll see before you a summary of all of your schools. You will then see in the subtotal category the initial estimates without any construction contingency, overhead and profit, other numbers that need to be baked into the hard cost estimate. As we look at the tally of all hard costs, if we were to complete the full scope at every school, you'd be looking at construction hard costs that just exceed $83 million. So the initial estimates that have come back indicate that we'd be looking at a spend of $83,073,713. And while that was an important exercise to go through in terms of identifying what we'd really like to do, unfortunately, that's only one piece of the budget. So your hard costs are going to end up needing to be about 70% of your budget. You'll then need 10% for contingency and 20% for soft costs. Contingency allows you some flexibility should things come up over the life of the project. Your soft costs allow you to pay all of your vendors, pay for furniture, pay for technology, pay for equipment, so things that will absolutely be required within the project. So if we take the $83 million that's available to you and back that out to be 70% of that available for hard cost construction, you'll see at the yellow bar at the bottom of the page that you have $58,100,000 available to actually spend. With that in mind, the plans as drawn and the estimates that have come back leave us with a deficit of just under $25 million. While perhaps a bit of a shock to the system, what it allowed us to do in the working group with the administration is go back and refocus on what the primary goals were, what had been communicated to the community as we set out to complete the project. Before I go forward and talk about how we see this playing out, I'd love to have the superintendent speak a little bit about his thoughts in terms of the numbers that have come in and the objective going forward.
Thanks, Derek. I think it's important for everyone to know, just to reiterate, I think some really important things that Derek mentioned in his presentation, that there was a significant number of meetings between the architect, central office administrators, our OPM, Colliers was involved, but building administrators to identify those things that they felt would improve their school. So every principal met with the architectural team and created a list, if you will, of things that they wanted in their school. So And this occurred over a significant period of time. There were lots and lots of amendments to those plans, and the architect then submitted that list of things that all of the administrators wanted done in their schools to the estimators. And as Derek said, the estimators came back with a total dollar amount that was significantly higher than expected. So $20+ million is a lot of money. So our dilemma is we need to decide how we want to use this pot of money that we have available to us. What is the best way for us to maximize the money that we do have? And we've talked about 2 phases. So phase 1 would be where we would focus our attention and use this $58 million, if you will, in immediate costs on construction, and then think about what we want to do for phase 2. And, you know, we've sort of come full circle on this issue, because when we first started talking about the bond referendum and doing the facilities work, the conversation was focused on improving the quality of the elementary schools, because we want Cumberland children to go to Cumberland School Department schools. So we want to make our elementary schools the best that they can be. Several of them have not been touched in years and years and years. So I strongly recommend, and I know that there are others who support my position on this, because this is where the conversation started initially, that we would really want to focus our attention on those elementary schools. And as you may recall, when we started talking about facilities in Cumberland, we brought up our visit to Pawtucket and the work that had been done at those elementary schools, and we thought, you know what, Cumberland should have 5 elementary schools like those elementary schools in Pawtucket that just have been totally renovated. So my position is that we use the funds that we do have to improve the quality of our elementary schools. That being said, we still recognize the need to complete safety upgrades at all of our schools. That's still in the plan. And we also see a need to continue with our thinking around our preschool plan by using the trans building as a swing space, and also to use the trans building as a facility for the preschool. So we're pretty excited about those plans. We feel that that would give us the biggest bang for our buck. Safety would be done in all schools. That does not go away. Renovation work, additions take place in those schools where we know we need additional space, like Ashton and Cumberland Hill, to give community some relief. We know that we have some work to do at Garvin, because the cafeteria does not accommodate all of the students who are presently going to school there. I think they have 5 lunches, community has 6 lunches. So we're going to be addressing the needs that we know exist, that we really wanted to focus our attention on from the get-go. So, you know, as the superintendent, I firmly believe that we really need to focus our attention on the elementary schools, make them wonderful places for elementary-aged children to attend, so that we can attract and keep our students in what has become a pretty impressive school system.
Great, thank you. So if you could give me just the next slide for anybody that might be looking at the monitor. So as we look at what that means in terms of the legacy here in Cumberland, or the life of the plan, as the superintendent had indicated, phase 1 pulls over the complete costs for all of the elementary schools, as well as the complete cost for the swing space. The summation of those values leads you to the $48,157,041 shown towards the bottom of that column. We then realized that we needed to do security and health and safety limited at both the middle schools, as well as security and some work around pre-K in the high school and trans building. So the jump from the 48.1 to the 58.1 we have available makes 10 million available to address those security and pre-K needs. And that essentially is the first phase of what will be a two-part process in terms of the capital investment here in Cumberland. Then, because we've fully understood and realized through drawings and cost estimation what the district's long-term goals are for the middles and the high schools, those can remain in place and can remain part of your goal, but would be happening in a second phase. And so I've laid that out if you jump to the next slide in what will be phase 2. And so if you look at the hard construction costs that you would incur in phase 2, you'd be looking for hard costs in the amount of $34,915,836. There, of course, would be contingency and soft costs that would needed to be added to that. But we really see this as a way to deliver on the promise that was made. I think it was really telling as we as a group went back and looked at some of our initial communications to the district about how we understood your need, some of the strongest points that we heard from both the superintendent and Senator Pearson, as well as conversations and support with the administration from the mayor's office. So we believe that the process has been very effective in stage 1 in identifying what you felt your problems were. In stage 2, kind of cataloging all of what the potential solutions could be. And now as we get ready to submit for the official appropriation, what the path forward could look like. But I'm happy to take questions on any of it.
So Derek, the work to be done at the high school and the middle schools, that will still be submitted to RIDE for approval on this?
So I think it would be submitted in terms of an understanding that you have a longer range plan. Phase 1 would exhaust the 83 million. Phase 2 would be submitted as a note, if you will, that to express that the district has gone through a comprehensive plan that's longer looking, that addresses all of your schools. And really takes a holistic approach to how you're delivering education. I think RIDE will be happy to receive that. You won't be committing to build on phase 2 within the first 5 years necessarily because of the capital requirement. But by indicating that you have a plan, it strengthens your position in terms of the idea that you've really fully considered each of your buildings and how a student would matriculate through your program.
But if we submit and the bids come in lower than expected based on, real bidding, there is the opportunity to look at these other schools and say, well, we can do these science labs in the middle schools and keep that going.
Yes, anything's possible. I certainly can't commit that that's likely this evening, but what I can say is when you submit this and it is approved, because you will have indicated that funds will be expended at every school. In phase 1, you have the larger funds in the elementary schools and the swing space, but you will have some funding for security and the pre-K in the middle and high schools. Should you perform much better than expected while building out your elementary schools in terms of capital requirements and have surplus funds, you absolutely can work with the state to advance what ultimately would be what you had called phase 2, because you would have informed them that that's part of your long-range plan, and it is highly likely that they would look at savings realized in the first round of projects and allow you to kind of work with them to continue to make that investment in those schools and those classrooms that would have been part of phase 2. So absolutely, there's lots of precedent for communities being able to really be smart with their money and invest to fulfill as much of their plan as they can.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. I hear you. I think I'm just not following. If you could help clear this up. So Phase 1 indicates that it is the elementary schools and also the swing space in the high school, which would be for the preschool. And as Mr. Mitchell said, that the recommendation would be to do the elementary schools and the security, but it looks like security is slated for Phase 2. So are we not doing security for 5 more years?
Yeah, let me clarify. So you would be doing security within Phase 1. So what I've done in the Phase 1 column where I indicate the couple security lines and security in pre-K, what that's intended to indicate is at, for example, McCourt and North Cumberland, if you were to do security today, plus all of the other things you wanted, the capital commitment would be over $7 million at each of those schools. And what I'm saying is, if you take all of the elementaries and the swing space, that gets you to a total of $48.1 million. The difference between $48.1 million and the $58.1 million that you have available means that you have $10 million to spend, distributed it in a fashion yet to be determined, for security at McCourt, security at North Cumberland, security and pre-K programs at the high school and transitions building. So all campuses would be touched. It's just a much lighter touch at the high school and the middle schools. Phase 2 then takes that full commitment as if you had done full build-outs at the high school and the 2 middle schools, and says whatever remains, which could be up to almost $35 million, could be done in another phase. But the thinking is that you would be able to do some of that security work within the Phase 1 column because of the $10 million differential you have to work with. Is that?
Yeah, so the cost estimation that you do have doesn't break out the security elements, so you're not able to say, okay, security is going to be $2 million, that leaves $5.8 million for Phase 2.
Sure. So that will need to be developed in greater detail prior to submitting in the middle of February. But we had just received the estimates back, and so we're basically forced to say, well, we know what the full numbers are for the elementary and the swing. It's going to require further analysis to really understand by line what those security costs are. But looking at security in 3 buildings, essentially, plus pre-K, the idea that that could fit within $10 million is reasonable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just to clarify, the 30% that you said, that includes like the soft costs like furniture and stuff like that?
Yes, yep, yeah, so this budget is conservative but realistic, so you'll have some contingency should things happen along the way, as well as all of the soft costs. So not only will you have the physical space, but outfitting the space becomes possible, making sure technology is in the space is possible. This approach in 2 phases really allows the team to take all of the feedback that was received and fully invest in the first round of projects in terms of the elementary schools. And I think that's a conscious decision and directive from the superintendent that is the appropriate and right thing to do, so that you're really we'll end up with a product that you can be quite proud of when we do the first series of turnovers with the buildings coming online, because you really will have attained your goals.
So is the plan for Colliers and Toronto for the school committee to have a work session on Monday for 3 of the school committee members, and then Tuesday night we'll get a further presentation in regards to, hopefully we'll have additional numbers for the hard cost, and give the building committee some direction as far as this is how how the plan plays out to move this district forward. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding, and we'll continue to communicate it. I think it's, as I said, I think it was a very successful process. It's always hard when the bill comes due for the complete wish list, but But fortunately, we really have been able to deliver upon the principal goals within phase one. And I think it sets you on a really great course to do some fantastic work here in the district. So we're excited to be sharing this with the larger community and all the stakeholders as we get ready to prepare the formal submission to the state.
Anyone have any more questions in regards to this? So, go ahead.
Just one last one. So you are on track to submit in February?
We will be submitting in February. The process, just so that everyone has a sense of what that typically looks like. So I believe, based on the calendar, the date this year is February 17th is in fact the due date. What happens after the submission goes in is the members of the school building authority review the submission and basically check our numbers, check the designs, check for compliance with all of the regulations, make sure that they understand essentially the case that we've presented them in terms of why these capital investments make sense. They will then respond with any comments or questions. We'll have some time to respond back and provide them supplemental information as necessary. So that can happen really between February and April or May, depending upon when the Council of Elementary and Secondary Education is ready to take up the current roster of projects for approval by community. And then in May or June, depending upon how the council sets their schedule, you'd be put forward by the Commissioner of Education to the council for approval.
I know it's not listed here, but if there's anyone in the audience that wanted to comment, you're welcome to come up and talk about this. But we're kind of, here we are finally, almost 2 years later, that we've got to make a plan. We can't afford not to move forward, considering that RIDE is going to cut our reimbursement from 43.5%, 44% to 37% next year. So everything we submit now has to get submitted so that we get the maximum reimbursement based on the governor and her school construction bonds that are out there. So we're going to have to do, make some hard choices, and on Tuesday night, approve something for the building committee so they can continue, because Colliers and Torado and the others have to get involved. They got to write a narrative in regards to how we're going to proceed and what the priorities are and how we're going to stage this.
I did think of one more question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Regarding the bonuses, you didn't mention the decrease overcrowding. Is community school not considered overcrowded based on the guidelines?
So I think further study is required. I think certainly certain program spaces have overcrowding. The idea that you'd need 6 lunches obviously is not appropriate. We need to be sure about the numbers. Basically, it looks at the overall space of the school. It then looks at the classrooms. It then looks at teacher contracts and how many students per class. And that analysis is really still happening. What I've requested of the team again is that we write the arguments in support of claiming those points anywhere we can. And then the Colliers team would take it to the state and advocate on your behalf that you do in fact receive those funds and are entitled to those items. But I think as we kind of make have the architect make the final changes and improvements to the drawings, that'll start to become very clear as to whether there is a case or isn't. So we'll know very soon. I don't know yet.
Thank you.
I just want to add to it, I do know that we're reaching out to other communities that have been approved to look at their utilization numbers, because RIDE has a 75% and an 85%, but we can't get the exact answer. So those schools that have been recently approved, we're going to reach out to their communities and ask the superintendents for permission to review their numbers so the architect can fill them in and, and Colliers write that narrative to really push the fact that we've reached that, utilization and get us every bonus point that we can get. That's the key. I mean, we want is, the more we, the more we get in bonus points, the less the town has to borrow right away and leaves us more to start, phase 2 down the road. Anyone else? Hearing none, all right, thank you for the presentation, and Tuesday night is our next official school committee meeting upstairs, and we'll hopefully, give you a vote for then to give you the keep this thing moving.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda, the approval of minutes from the regular meeting of January 9th, 2020, the special meeting of January 14th, 2020, and approval of the minutes from the executive session from January 9th, 2020. I need a motion? Motion by Mrs. Waters to approve, second by Mr. Fiorello. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is a report out of executive session meeting on January 23rd, 2020. There were no votes taken on January 23rd tonight, and I need a motion to seal the minutes. Motion by Mrs. Waters. Second by Mr. Fiorello. Any discussion? All in favor? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is the CHS SAT testing date.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may have mentioned this briefly to the school committee a while ago. The school department has learned that there has been a change in the SAT date. Unlike RICAS, where there is a testing window over several weeks at all of the schools, the SAT date is actually a directive from the College Board. And initially, the SAT date was March 30th. However, and I don't know how this happened, but we learned that the SAT date was changed from March 30th to March 25th, which is a Wednesday. And that creates a problem because of the amount of time required for the SAT. Because Wednesday is an early release day, there would be a problem with not only providing the amount of testing time for students, but we also need to feed them. And it would have been impossible for us to accommodate the testing and feeding the students taking the tests on the early release day. So what we need to do, and we have 2 months, we actually already have drafted a letter to send out to parents so that they can be prepared to let them know that on that Wednesday, March 25th, I'm sorry, the original date was the 30th. The date that it has been moved to is the 25th. We want to let parents know that so that they can make the necessary arrangements. We also have been in, we're going to have to make up that time somehow with teachers, because that is normally time that they use. It's our common planning time that we use, that we provide professional development and opportunities for teachers to collaborate. So we're in the process of coming up with a solution to that. But I just wanted to let you all know that it's out of our control, and we're going to have to respond accordingly. So on that particular day, rather than get out an hour earlier as they do currently, they're going to be there for the whole day.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What about the seniors?
Well, all of the students are going to remain in school, and the reason being that transportation impacts all grade levels. So the thinking is that that would be a regular school day for everybody else. Of course, things are never as easy as they may seem, but we're thinking that, that particular Wednesday would just be like any other school day. So I know that, I've been in, Mr. Costa has been a part of the conversation, as has Kate McMorrow. So, I'm sure we'll be hearing a little bit more about that. But I think we'll be okay. Good question.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fiorello.
I would just ask that any communication we have with parents would really stress that it's for all grade levels, all buildings, just so that there's no confusion because of the SAT.
Well, I think the message, good point. I think the message has to be that that's going to be like a regularly scheduled school day. So that particular Wednesday on March 25th is going to be like any other day.
All right, next is report of standing committees. Item number A is payment of bills. Mr. Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no payment of bills.
No payment of bills, okay. All right, we will, that's good for the district at the moment, I guess. Let's move to item number B, fiscal management subcommittee update. Mr.
Thank you,
Salvatore.
Mr. Chair. Fiscal management did meet tonight upstairs in room 319 at 6 p.m. Like I said, no payment of bills. There was not a monthly office monthly report. Sedesco did give, the food service did give their report an update. We did approve 3-0 the employment contract for our new Director of Human Resources, which is out in our audience, right? She's out in our audience right now. And we also discussed and voted to approve 3 resolutions, which I know we'll touch base on a little bit later. Cumberland High School activity report was filed, and there was no public comment, and we adjourned at 6:25, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. Any
Thank you.
questions for him? All right, hearing none, we will move to policy and procedure subcommittee update. Mr. Fiorello?
Yes, policy and procedures did meet the other night. 2 of the topics, both policies that we will be voting on later tonight have to do with school committee management principles, as well as meeting and procedures and elections of officers. The other 2 items that we touched on briefly was G1, the affirmative action plan. I've had some conversations with Mr. Adams regarding this. Our policy is currently at about 6 pages. We feel that we could whittle it down to 1 or maybe 2 pages at the most. We're going to make it a little more overreaching and very clear-cut. And I'm also planning on recategorizing it to the basic foundation section, which is under the letter A, and taking it out of the G personnel section, because this policy will actually apply to students as well as personnel. It's the kind of the model that I've seen in other districts, and that's what we're going to move into. Plus, it'll remove the need for us to update the policy every year or 2, like we've been doing. So hopefully we'll be able to craft a policy that will stand the test of time for a while. The other item is a smoke-free policy. We had a brief discussion about this in the past. We are required by law to have a policy specifically stating that no smoking of any kind, of any substance, can be in any school building, any school property, any event that the school is renting, leasing, borrowing. So this will apply pretty much to everywhere. And we'll need to have some signage, which I believe is free from the Department of Health. So we're going to craft a policy about that. I'm hoping to also include other substances, whether it's alcohol or drug use. We don't currently have anything about that because, quite honestly, it's illegal anyways. But we're just going to have one policy, hopefully, that'll cover everything. So that'll be coming up in a couple weeks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Fiorillo, will that also include any vaping?
Yes, the smoking covers everything that you can inhale.
And also, Mr. Fiorillo, how about no guns allowed will be in that as well?
No, this is strictly going to be a smoking, alcohol, drug policy.
All right, thank you. Next is Achievement Communication Subcommittee update.
The Achievement and Communication Subcommittee met also on Tuesday night with one main agenda topic, which was to review the achievement plan at Garvin Elementary School. So Principal Michelle Carter came in and presented the last 2 years of their RICAS results and overall demographics of the school, and then laid out their plan for what they're doing to improve student achievement across that school. And an important element of that, and that we were able to introduce this year, is an academic coach for the teachers who serves as a mentor as a coach in the classroom, as somebody who can ensure that consistency is happening across grade levels and across teaching styles. And we heard the same thing from McCourt about the absolute benefit of having a teacher academic coach at McCourt as well. So these are things that have been part of our achievement-related plan, which leads us to our next meeting, which is February 11th, and our focus is going to be on the achievement-related budget items. You know, last year we created our what we would hope to be able to achieve through our budget directly related to increasing student achievement, and we will be doing that again on February 11th. And we've had some nice data to look at in terms of things we've implemented over the past couple of years that have really proven to increase achievement in some of our most kind of needed student populations. So that meeting will be on February 11th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Friedman. Next is District Health and Wellness Subcommittee, Mrs. Bernardo.
Yes, our next meeting actually is scheduled on Tuesday, February 6th at 4 o'clock in the Trans Building. So we will have an update for you in February.
Thank you. Next is comments from the public. Anyone who wishes to speak, please come to the podium.
Jeff Mutter, 12 Scotia Drive. I'm just here to speak, I'm not sure where it is, but to ask you to act favorably upon the resolution that that asks for the, where is it on your docket? The maintenance of effort on stated SCR 2020-03. So, and Councilman Kinch is in attendance as well. We did have a meeting with our legislative body, and you know, Rep. McLaughlin has kind of spearheaded the need for passage of this resolution, and then subsequently, if you act favorably upon it, it would be in front of the council at the February 5th meeting. So I'm here to ask you to look favorably upon that. Obviously, there's been a lot of improvements in the district, and we think that any sort of removal of aid would not be appropriate based on some of the governor's comments, even in the State of the State address, where she stated that, you know, we need to fund what's working and fund what's not working, and obviously it's working here. So we would like to have your support, which I would imagine you probably would look favorably upon that. I'll also say, just on the presentation from Colliers, I mean, obviously this is a, you know, a difficult situation, and no one wants to cut anything. The only comment that I would say about that is whatever we do, let's do it well. And so we'll leave that in your capable hands to determine what exactly we do. But I do think that it's important that there's going to be obviously a financial responsibility associated with that project. So and it's going to be a significant one. So let's do whatever we do as well as we can so that we can justify that expense. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Mr. Kinch?
Support for that resolution. We had a very productive meeting, and I think on my standpoint at least, I just don't, for some reason I can't get my head around it, how we're being penalized for excellence. What the school committee has done, what the teachers, Mr. Boni's team has done, it flabbergasted me when we're talking about excellent in education, but when you get there, and again, I always bring up the amount of people that you have to move to get there to be penalized, for lack of a better word. I know it's a formula, but just didn't make sense to us. So I'm sure you're already going to vote favorably on it, but I just wanted to know where the majority, or all in that meeting, including Finance Chair Salvatore, were coming from. Thank you.
We appreciate that. We appreciate the assistance of the town solicitor to help draw that up so that we're all on the same page. So that'll be coming down the road. Anyone else? And none. All right, next is public hearings. Item number A is reading of amended policies B2, Code of Basic Management Principles and Ethical School Standards. School committee stipend increase to match the town council stipend increase. Mr. Fiorello.
I would just ask that this amended policy, it be read into the record.
Mr. Fiorello makes a motion that this be read into the record.
We don't need to make a motion. We just need to
Okay.
read, yeah, we just need to do it.
All right, next is B3, School Committee Meeting Procedures and Election of Officers. Mr. Fiorello, you asked that to be read into the record?
I do. B3, school committee meeting procedures, also be read in the record. And we took no action on the affirmative action plan, so that does not need to be read.
No action. Okay, next, anyone have any public comment in regards to those two items that we're going to hear later? Hearing none. Okay, we'll move to old business. Discussion and a vote to approve amended policy, item number A, B2, Code of Basic Management Principles and Ethical School Standards. Was noted here as the school committee stipend increase to match the town council stipend increase. So I had asked the school committee to address this. Been trying for a while to match the stipend that the town council gets. They've asked us to kind of match theirs as well, to be on the same page, and I think it's time. I don't think the stipend for the school committee has been changed in 20-something plus years, where they used to get medical coverage and so forth, and I think it's time that we approve this and match the town council. This would not go into effect until the next general election, whoever that school committee may be. So I need a motion. Mr. Collins? You can make a motion, we can second it, so we can have discussion. Mr. Collins makes a motion to approve.
Second for discussion.
Second by Mr. Fiorello for discussion. Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
We've already talked about this. Just given the ominous budget forecast that we're looking at, I can't support any sort of stipend increase. If we potentially looking at layoffs, I can't look at my neighbors or, my, teachers at Cumberland and say that I voted myself a raise. So leave it at that.
Mr. Fiorello?
Now, I basically agree with Mr. Collins. However, being on the school committee for 8 years, and I've been trying to, I know Mr. DeMonica and I have been discussing this for probably 4 to 6 years, to increase the stipends because they haven't been updated in so long. And when you look at some of the other towns and what they're getting, whether it's medical benefits or, I know Woonsocket just went to $8,000 a year. Cumberland also meets more times a month than most other school committees in the state. We also, unlike any other elected office in the state, we have to perform, we have to attend professional development sessions throughout the year. We meet, it seems like constantly, especially lately. And although in the past, I have actually brought forth amended policies to increase the stipend by, just $1,000, and that was voted down. But because we are going into 4-year terms, and we have a hard time, quite honestly, getting even 7 people to run for office, hopefully this might make somebody, make the decision to run for the office for 4 years. And it's not really for us. This is really helping the school committee of the future, because otherwise we can't change it again for another 4 years. And the town council has set the standard for what the stipend should be, at $5,000 and $6,000 for their, the head of their council, the president. So we are just matching theirs. The policy is just amended from the $2,200 that we currently make to the $5,000 and then the $6,000 for the chairperson. There's no good time to do it. There never has been, there never will be. But I think, considering that the new terms are 4 years, I think we owe it to the school committees of the future to approve this, and I would move passage.
Anyone else have any comments? I kind of echo Mr. Fiorello's. There's a lot of meetings we come to. There's never a good time For me, I take my stipends and I donate them, buy shirts, shoes for the music band, for the marching band, a 3D printer for McCourt Middle School. So, at least for me, I donate a lot of that money back. But there are times that I have to attend a lot of meetings as chairman where I have to leave my work as well to come here during the day to handle business. And I think, with the town council wanting to do that, they changed the mayor's salary as well. They were just bringing it up. It's not quite where it should be, but, it's something. And we all didn't get elected just because we wanted the stipend. We thought when we all ran that we could be a real change for the school district and Leeds. So with that being said, we have a motion. We have a second by Mr. Fiorello. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Nay, Mr. Collins votes 6-1 to approve. Now, this would not go into effect until November of 2020, whoever that school committee may be. Okay, next is new business. We got the update from the Colliers in Toronto. Again, we have a meeting on Tuesday night at 6:00 PM upstairs to further get better numbers, hopefully from the cost estimators, but you kind of see the plan that's been kind of laid out, and the mayor has looked at it as well, and thinks it's doable. It's a change, but it's a change for good. Next is item number B, discussion and a vote to improve the employment contract for the Director of Human Services. This was heard upstairs in fiscal. It is budgeted, correct, Mr. Salvatore?
Correct.
So it's a budgeted position, and I need a motion to approve the contract.
Make a motion, Mr. Salvatore.
Mr. Salvatore makes a motion, second by Mr. Collins. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is the discussion and/or vote to approve the appointment of the Director of Human Resource. I'll leave that to the superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned upstairs, it's my pleasure to ask for you to approve the appointment of Katie Duncanson, who is with us this evening. Katie comes to us with a wealth of experience as a human resource professional. She's been working in at least 2 school systems, Coventry first, and then Warwick. And in addition to being in human resources as a director, actually an executive director in Warwick, Katie is also an attorney. She is highly regarded, and the former superintendent of Cumberland, Dr. Phil Thornton, could not speak more highly of Katie. We had several impressive candidates that we interviewed, and really impressive candidates, and Katie rose to the top, and it's my pleasure to ask for your support in appointing her to this critical position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I need a motion to approve the appointment of Catherine Duncanson to the position of Director of Human Services. Motion by Mrs. Waters, second by Mr. Salvatore. Any discussion? Mr. Salvatore? Mr.
I know, all us Italians look the same. I just want to welcome her. Also, the experience that we are getting, and, right before March, which we all know is a big time for us personnel-wise, my biggest concern was getting somebody that can just take over this position and hit the ground running, and I think we're getting that. So I'm very happy that this is working out.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0. Katie, we normally give the candidates an opportunity to say a few words. If you'd like, you don't have to, but welcome to the district.
Quick, yep. I'm just thrilled, and thank you for your vote of confidence, and I'm excited to start my work here in Cumberland. You could not have been talked up more by your former superintendent. He loved it here.
All right, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with all of you.
All right, next is item number D, discussion and a vote to approve resolutions SCPR 1-2020-03, Toronto Architects Health and Safety invoices. Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was passed in our fiscal meeting, 3-0, and we recommend passage.
Mr. Salvatore recommends passage of SCPR 1-2020-03 for the invoices for Toronto, that for work they've already completed.
And I recommend the motion too, Mr. DePaul.
You make a motion to approve. Second by Mr. Collins. Any discussion? I'd just like to say I want to thank Mr. Toronto for waiting so long. Some of the work that he did was included the boilers at the high school that we've miraculously got them repaired at the moment and working, but he was given direction to continue doing that work. If we couldn't repair the boilers, that we needed a plan in place to immediately step forward. So he's waited quite a long time for that. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is the motion, SCPR 1-2020-04, E&E Systems invoices for preventive maintenance on the evaporator unit of North Cumberland Middle School. Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This also came across into our fiscal management subcommittee meeting, and it was passed 3-0, and I would like to make a motion.
Mr. Salvatore makes a motion, second by Mrs. Waters. Any discussion? So I just want to alert the public, this is for work that we're trying to get resolved at North Cumberland Middle School. We have some rooms that we're using there that really shouldn't be used as classrooms, but we are. And there's heating and air conditioning issues, ventilation issues that we're trying to get resolved. Amy had gone up there and replaced the units for the outside, and we're still dealing with a lot of issues with wiring and so forth, and a job that wasn't done correctly in the first place years ago. There's still work to be done at North Cumberland Middle School, about $30,000 worth of work to really fix the issue, but this is to pay them for the services that they've already went out to do and try to resolve on our behalf. So the amount is $15,230, and we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0 on that one. Next is the Stage 2 ride requirements. We were given a sheet recently that RIDE has, seems like they have additional requirements every time we turn around to have to get approved for the Stage 2 application. And part of it talks about no idling of buses and vehicles on school property, things like that.
Mr. Chair, I do have it pulled up.
You do. Won't you read it first, please?
Three of the requirements. One of the requirements, as recommended by RIDE, is the district formally adopt the Federal Energy Star Program, which is also titled Energy Efficient Appliances. The second one is what you had mentioned, the motor vehicle idling policy on all school grounds. And then the third one is a requirement of the district to be compliant with the NE chips for design, construction, and maintenance of its buildings and grounds. So the NE-chips compliance.
Yeah, so we've done that, the last couple of years. You may recall that the univentilators that we did at the middle school, the cost was double to reach the CHIPS requirement, and so RIDE is requiring that this be approved prior to our Stage 2 application so that they have it on file. So I need a motion.
Mr. Chair, this passed in our fiscal management subcommittee tonight, 3-0, and I'd like to make a motion, and God bless you.
Mr. Salvatore makes a motion. Second by Mrs. Waters. She wants to go.
Sorry, is the motion to bless Mrs. Waters?
No. Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0. So that will get signed. I'm not sure whether the superintendent has to sign it or I have to sign it. So it goes in with our Stage 2 application as well. Next is SCR 2020-03, request state to provide maintenance of effort on state aid received in fiscal year '21. Mr. Salvatore had met, and the mayor and others, Mr. Kinch, our counselor, is here tonight, and others with our legislative leaders at the State House to talk about the approximately $815,000 cut that the school district is going to receive next year because our growth in the town, value-wise, has increased. And this was something I feared a couple of years ago because Smithfield got hit with $1 million deduction. And so our legislators have asked us to do a resolution to send to the town council and get approved by the, and send it to the legislature, and hopefully they can get that approved and put through. That would help us restore that reduction in state aid. You know, as Councilor Kinch says, we get penalized for doing good, you know, and it hurts. And we may get hit with the same amount again next year, reduction. And everything we can do, the lobby, the legislature, including, as Mr. Collins has said upstairs, talking to the Speaker of the House, Mr. Mattiello, about how we can rectify this. The state is 2 years away probably from redoing the state aid formula again, and we need to do something right away. So I would ask that all the members here approve this resolution tonight, and we'll send it down to the town council.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
do you mind if I read it?
sure, go right ahead.
Be it resolved by the Cumberland School Committee as follows. Whereas 5 years ago, Cumberland schools were ranked at or near the middle of the state in performance in ELA and math through standardized testing. And whereas now Cumberland schools are among the top performers in both with an 18% improvement in math and a 15% improvement in ELA. And whereas the state average per pupil expenditure is $17,355, and Cumberland ranks last in per pupil expenditures in the state at $14,527. And whereas an $815,000 reduction in state aid per pupil per the funding formula will result in the elimination of multiple positions in educational programs. And whereas those positions and programs have been vital towards the positive growth Cumberland has experienced in student performance, and the loss of state aid will likely result in a decrease in achievements made thus far. And whereas any further reductions in state aid would compromise the most basic academic functions of the Cumberland District. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Cumberland School Committee of Cumberland, Rhode Island, as follows. Section 1, the Cumberland School Committee fully expresses its support for legislation to sustain and continue the academic improvements the Cumberland School District has achieved. And Section 2, the Cumberland School Committee urges the Cumberland Town Council to express its support for legislation requesting the state to provide maintenance and effort in state aid for educational to Cumberland for fiscal year 2021. And Section 3, the Cumberland School Committee urges the General Assembly to pass legislation to fund the anticipated loss of maintenance and effort in state aid for education to Cumberland. In the last, Section 4, this resolution shall become effective immediately upon passage, and the superintendent is directed to forward the executed resolution to the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and the entire Cumberland delegation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. I need a motion to approve by Mrs. Waters.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Freeman. I would just want to make one comment. The parents of school children out there and those that live in Cumberland that don't have school children anymore, I'd ask that you would reach out to our legislative delegation at the State House and voice your support, because they're there to fight for us, and we can't afford this $815,000 hit and then do it again next year. We've done good work in Cumberland, our schools, because of Superintendent, Mr. Damana, and their leadership of everyone that works here, Mr. Costa, those that are here. We've done great work. And $815,000 is a big number just to make up a loan, and we can't afford that. We need help. We need you to reach out and, seek those that are in power and try to get them to change, because it's not just Cumberland. It's all these schools, suburban areas who seem to get hit, and then the urban schools, they get their nice little share, as reminded that one school district is getting 91% reimbursement for school construction, and we're half of that. And why? Why aren't we all equal? So please go out and reach out to these people. So we have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
You mentioned the other districts getting the funding, but they're not getting the results. So I don't know if this is money well spent. So we are ultimately being penalized for being successful. That's what it looks like, and for having rising property values.
Right.
And, Ray, appreciate you reaching out to the delegation. Everybody else has been working on it. But like you said, we got to start making some calls.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it 7-0. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Kinch, for attending that meeting as well at the State House. You are a liaison from the town council, and you're here every meeting, so we appreciate that. All right, next is item number E, discussion and the vote to approve the amended policies. B3, school committee meeting procedures and election of officers. Mr. Fiorello.
Yes, this is a policy that we discussed the other night, and actually there were some amendments in the policy meeting, which I believe everyone should have received today.
Correct.
That I emailed. Excellent. It's really, the highlights are, we've talked in the past about it, and I did put it into this policy. This is the place where it would go. Limiting, where it says public comment, the chair may limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker. Sometimes people speak a little bit longer, and if every single person got up and spoke for 5+ minutes, it could be a very long night. But this allows the chair, if there's only 1 or 2 speakers, we can just let them have their say. And, we have to put some limits on it. I know the town council has done it in the past. Also, we've changed that each officer, the chair, the vice chair, and the clerk would serve 2-year terms. They would not be term limited. After that second year, because we're now going into 4-year terms next year, a new vote would be taking place to re-elect either those members or new members to those positions, and those votes would take place in the first regular meeting in November. We also removed some of the language around the organizational meeting, because we just kind of simplified it to mean the first meeting in November. And then we talked about who can sign documents. I just clarified some language, which is all in line with the town charter. The town charter allows the chairperson and the clerk to sign all the official documents. No one else really has that ability, and I don't believe that we should have the ability to override the town charter. So it's all laid out there. It's pretty simple, I think. And I would move passage of this
Mr.
policy.
Fiorello moves passage. I have a second. Second by Mr. Salvatore. Any discussion? I think the key to this change is that the chairperson, the vice chairperson, and the clerk serve at the pleasure of the school committee members here, and they can be removed at any time, so we don't have any issues going down the road. You got replaced and, incurring fees. So that's the key to getting that done. So if we're not happy, we're not happy. And, we move on. But instead of being for 4 years, we're served 2 years if everyone's happy. If they're happy, they vote the person in again. And but I like this resolution. It cleans up a lot of things for the town, and we don't need to make it a charter amendment or anything like that in order to do this. So Mr. Fiorello made a motion. It was seconded by Mrs. Waters. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. I think Mr. Salvatore seconded that. All right, sorry about that. All right, next is the G1 Affirmative Action Plan. That's tabled. Actually, it's not tabled, it's off, no action taken. Personnel recommendations, there are none, Mr. Superintendent, correct? And do we need to go back into executive session?
No, we do not, Mr.
Do
Chairman.
not, so I need a motion to adjourn? Motion,
Excuse me,
yes.
School committee comments.
Oh, yeah, we forgot about that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just have a simple, I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk about the renovation work, the bond work, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a bumpy road every step of the way. It's probably going to get messy, but at the end of the day, I think as long as we work together with the town council, the building committee, and the mayor's office, I think we will see very positive improvements to our schools, and at the end of the paying for the bond in 20 years, I think we will have put Cumberland in a better place when all is said and done.
Mr. Fiorello, I echo that. As serving 25 years on building committees in this town, as long as we remember one thing, the building committee votes first, there are eyes and ears, and then the school committee and the town council will vote after that, because we need those people looking closely at the details. We are not prepared to do that. So I echo that. So anyone else? Having no comments? All right, motion to adjourn? By Mr. Fiorello, second by Mrs. Waters. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.